Hello, I'm Professor Margaret Rogers Van Coops. I'm also a doctor of integrated and alternative medicine, clinical hypnosis, counselor, the list goes on. And I have chosen to share with you some of my educational courses online. And this first introduction is free. But over the next weeks, months, I will be teaching a great deal on my YouTube channel, which I'm yet to begin. So let's start. Like life, all things are important to us, whether it's simply eating or going to the bathroom or simply making a choice in whether we should or should not go in or stay out or whatever it is that we need to do. So where do we start with our complicated awareness of life and its existence? Well, some people talk about the ancient uh, American Homo sapiens or European ones versus Neanderthal. And what we're actually looking at is not really the form of us humans or the growth of us humans, but rather the DNA and the RNA, the things that we've always in some time thought unimportant has started to evolve in this world that we now call technology. And it's thanks to technology that I'm able to sit here in front of my computer and make you this free talk. So, my topic today is not only about our ancient self, but also about our soul coding, which I've written quite a few books about, and also about our states of awareness. So, I'm going to begin with something very generic and say that deep within your brain, in the old brain, what is called the midbrain, is actually your coding. And that coding is tied into your human existence, male or female, even animals, even ants, they all have codings within them. And that with our experiences of study, trials and tribulations, we've come to understand that we are communal creatures, no matter what our form is. And our communal self longs to be with other people. I'm sure some of you have seen programs like Alone, where volunteers go and sit in the middle of nowhere, forest, freezing snow, hot desert, and try and survive and face their inner selves. And in the process of doing that, some of them can't last very long, and others seem to go the full level, but at great sacrifice to self. So, what is it that forces us to want to push our boundaries, to go beyond those everyday things? It is the nature of your spirit. Your spirit is ancient by our human consciousness. In other words, you have evolved throughout a very, very long time of millenniums, of different centuries, ages, periods, not only on this planet, but in other forms of other lives, in other dimensions that we can't even conceive while we are in human form. Lately, we've had a lot of people saying they've had experiences with aliens and have come to know that there are different types of aliens who come into our world, interact with us, and then disappear. To the majority of us, we would have said that they were insane or uh, absolutely of the devil in past centuries and locked them up and thrown away the key. Today, we are moving through more and more people being able to say, I've had an experience, an encounter with something that was not human or not of this world. But I would like to bring you back to us and say, we were not originally of this world. We were pioneers from other dimensions, other worlds that we can't even remember right now. And we have, in our own way, genetically engineered the species that have populated not only this planet, but many other planets. And though we can't prove it, what we can say, as we discover more and more about the DNA strand, is that there is much more to us than we originally thought. Now, if we go back into the last century, what we're looking at is a breakout from the old style of belief, which was that there was a God who was in some way controlling us and manipulating us to be whatever we were becoming throughout our lives in different periods of history. But now we're beginning to realize that we do have freedom of choice and that we can change our cellular neuromuscular memory, that we can change the DNA, we can isolate certain aspects of cells and the genome factor and so on, and that we can ultimately even do some changes to a mother who's pregnant in the womb with a baby whose chromosomes not dividing in the right way. So what a big difference between the past century and this century. We've come a long way in a great deal of growth. Parallel to that, we've come a long way in understanding that God is not a wrathful God, that God is a loving God, and that, even more importantly, that God is not separate and apart from us and someone we have to pray to morning, noon, and night on our knees, hoping and praying that our prayer will be heard, but rather to say that we've come to know that we are now God manifested within each of us, and that each of us is a fragment of God, and that we are connected by a lineage, shall we say, of energy that goes back eons of time. Some of us are psychic and some of us are healers. We have, in our own way, developed an ability to look back through the ages and, without knowing why, just recall ancestral history as though we were there, living, watching it happen. In truth, every aspect of our spiritual growth is accessible. If you develop your psychic ability and you allow yourself to trust yourself indubitably, you're going to find more of you. It's inevitable. You cannot avoid discovering self. After all, that's why we're here on this planet now. We are exploring our DNA, as I said earlier, and our RNA, and yes, we're going back in time looking at fossils and things like that to answer questions as to where did we come from. So today, where I'm coming from is to introduce you to the idea that you actually have inherited a soul structure coding. A soul structure coding basically gives you a personality and a character which is unique to you. It allows you to perceive yourself from your point of view as a human being. It stimulates you to take action in some way, shape, or form to survive here on this planet. Whatever you decide you want to do is right for you, even if it makes you make a mistake. Because ultimately we learn through mistakes. We understand that we have, in our own way, put ourselves through some kind of issue that has taught us the hard way, ouch, that hurts, or oh dear, I made myself look a fool by doing something that I couldn't do very well, and so on. We have a lot of negative connotations about ourselves. We judge ourselves continually. We always try and compare ourselves with other people. We want to be better than that person over there. We want to outsmart, outrun, outjump, outthink, outtalk. It just goes on and on. Even, yes, outsing in competitions. So we are competitive by nature, and that is a very important part of us. That is the part of us that wants to really stand our ground. So what I want to bring forward to you, first of all, is an understanding of what I call the body syndromes. But first I have to explain what a syndrome is. A syndrome is a state of being. That's all it means, basically. You develop a way of showing yourself and doing whatever you want to do in such a way that others can observe you. Now, a syndrome can be something very negative, or it can be something very positive. It could even be neutral, depending on your point of view. So I made a few notes here. Get my book here so I make sure I don't forget anything. because after all, if I'm teaching you for a while, you want to get as much information as you can out of me. So bear with me a moment. I want to put them in a certain order that I wrote them down. The first syndrome that I want you to think about is responsibility syndrome. And if you think about a young child who's first toddling, mother, father, grandma, whoever's present is going to come in and oversee whatever that child is doing. Our motive is to protect that child from harming themselves. But what that actually does, by telling the child, no, stay away from the fire, you'll burn yourself, or don't jump into the swimming pool because you haven't learned to swim yet, you'll drown yourself. What we're basically saying is we are able to harm ourselves simply by seeing something and wanting to touch it, experience it, explore it. And that is the nature of human, Homo sapiens, shall we say, going back through times. It's the nature of every animal to jump with glee and swing about and hop over, boulders or slither around grass or live in an icy area where they're built for that area. We have, as beings, developed a natural instinct to survive. And with that natural instinct to survive comes the responsibility of knowing what you're doing as you survive. Now, if we have a lot of training, shall we say, by our parents, our school teachers, the priest, the guru on the corner, whoever it is in some way in our country and in our faith and in our circumstances, we are taught that whatever you do, you must be responsible for yourself. And if you love and care about anyone else, you must also be responsible about those people. You are the caretaker. Now, that sounds reasonable. But what if the person you want to take care of doesn't want your help? Then it becomes controversy. Then it becomes an issue. Hey, I'm trying to save you from yourself, and you're not listening to me. And I'm doing my best as a sacrificial lamb to get through to you that you're harming yourself. Now, that doesn't sound like we want to hear that every day, but actually that condition is programmed into us within the first 2 years of our life. We are taught by looks on the features of mother and father, by body stance, by actions such as tapping our hands if we're naughty, or unfortunately with more unbalanced parents, maybe hit and chastised in various ways. And if I go back to the last century, for example, my father's generation, which is 100 years ago, then we would think nothing of giving the older boys in school a cane to flog the younger boys. And I'm sorry to say it was much abused in England in public schools. By public schools, in those days they were called that, but they're actually private schools, where parents paid a lot of money for their children to go to be educated and conditioned to the British standard. Women had the same kind of thing. It was more about sewing and stitching and how to host and run a household and so on, because women were always considered not capable, not having a brain that was super duper like they are today. So each was given an understanding in their everyday lives experience to be responsible for every action, every mode of discipline that one could possibly come up with. And of course, when one is learning these kinds of things, one is using the body in certain ways. For example, if I was back in the 1900s, I would have sat with my legs up, my body straight, my head high, and I would look around rather snobbishly at whoever's going by, even if I was a working person, such as, cooking potatoes for people in Ireland who didn't have much money. It was still this thing about body language. Today, we don't really think about it. We slop around in flip-flops and dress according to the weather and don't think about appearances unless, of course, we're going to visit the king or queen of a country or stand up in some parliament or something, wear a dress suit and jacket and so on. There's still a few of those things that remain. But generally, the theatrical business has opened the door with modern ways for us to mix up the dressed up part with the lackadaisical part, so one thinks nothing of mixing jeans with a nice jacket. This is an example of change in the way we look at the world, and we are taught to adapt to that and to be responsible for the way we adapt. Now, if we are a pioneer and we want to do something very differently, then we are seen as breaking the code. And when we break the code, we're considered outside of the majority of people's concepts of the clan, as it were, of the tribe. And if we rattle the network, as it were, of the tribe enough, then we could shake it up. And as a result of our influence, we can then cause people to say, hey, I don't have to act the way my ancestors acted. I can actually do things differently. And we've been watching that through the 90s through to the 2020 coming up. We've seen a big change in those 30 years almost of people realizing that we do not have to make up for our ancestors' mistakes. Now, let me say here that there are two sides to the ancestors. One side is, oh, I'm ashamed of them. They were this and that was judged and condemned. They were evil, they were slaves, or they were murderers, or they fought battles that didn't need to be done and took people's lands and so on and so forth. And then there's the other side. Hey, I'm so proud of my ancestors. They were pioneers and they traveled here and there and they taught people who couldn't write to write and read, and they brought certain goods to different countries and showed them how to use them and make things and so on. And, depending on how it's given to us, we take responsibility for those things that our ancestors did. Now, if we've got negative ancestors, then there's a part of us that's ashamed. And believe it or not, being ashamed is intellectually thought about, but the emotion is very, very strong. It's, in a way, a part of anger. And so, if you've done something wrong, and we're going to bring this into a small child dropping something that mother valued and it's broken, and mother says, look what you've done. You've broken my favourite vase, and now I can't stick it together. And you're a naughty boy or girl, and go sit on your bed. And the child, just by looking at mother's energy and feeling through psychometry her sensations of anger, starts crying. And so we start to show ourselves that we have emotions about how we are received in this world. And in our own way, according to our brain and the way we decide to sort out our experiences, we develop these 5 syndromes. And the first one that we're talking about right now is the responsibility syndrome. So why do we store these syndromes? That's the most important thing, because everything, for example, Parkinson's disease is a syndrome. It's a syndrome of belief that one can never achieve one's goals because there's so many responsibilities that one has to take care of that one never has really got time for self. I happen to have cured myself of Parkinson's disease, and I can tell you that I had to deprogram myself of not only this life, but of my mother and father's lives, and of their parents' lives, and my grandparents on both sides, and going back in ancestry 4 generations where it was recorded that everyone had Parkinson's disease, even before it was named Parkinson's disease. After all, it was named after a gentleman named Mr. Parkinson, who was a doctor. So it matters not where things come from, but how we perceive them and how we put the energy of that perception into our body. Here I'm going to give you a little example I often use with my students. A child will be sitting in school, they're 5 years old, teacher's in the middle of telling some story or something, the child suddenly realizes they want to go to the toilet. They put their hand up. Teacher ignores them. Put the other hand up. Still teacher ignores them, and so on. And slowly, the hand gets higher and higher, and their arm is aching. And finally the teacher says, what is it, Billy? And Billy said, I'm going to go to the toilet. If I don't get there quick, I'm going to have an accident. What do you think that's done to the body? You've stored all the way down this arm, all the way under here with the pressure of the other hand trying to hold your arm up, a memory with the pressure going down this arm into your back, and of course across your shoulders and across your back. And that is where you would store responsibility, across your shoulders and all around this area. At the same time, it's going to go down your spine. Now, you haven't stood, you're sitting. So your legs and your hips, they're not involved here in this movement. It's all here in the upper body. So the responsibility is stored in the upper body. It's also related to the third eye, the throat chakra, and the heart chakra. This is your crown chakra. The crown chakra is where your brain processes everything that you've gone throughout your life with, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, inspirational, spiritual, artistic, and so on. Now, when you're a young child in the first 5 years, you have no judgment about what is right or wrong. All you know is that you have to take care of things. So the responsibility is often the first syndrome that you're programmed to actually record. So this upper part of your body will often break down with bad shoulders, neck ache, backache, upper arm strength, weaknesses, and so on, upper back going in and out in the bones and the ribs. And ultimately, you have to visit a chiropractor to be realigned because you want all those bones to be in the right position so that all your muscles can heal and the ligaments are not strained and stressed. But what if you didn't know about a chiropractor? What if you didn't know where to go? You will continue to still feel and think about these things subliminally without even knowing you're doing it. Now let's fast forward this childhood need to go to the bathroom to you're now an adult, maybe 45, 50 or something, and you're up, in your kitchen, you're reaching up for something on the top shelf, and all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, you feel desperately you need to go to the bathroom. And without waiting, you put down everything, you run to the bathroom, to only find there's a trickle. And you think, well, didn't I go a little while ago? Oh, of course I did. Well, I don't know, must be an extra bit. And you rationalize it. What you're actually telling yourself is, hey, you've just put your body in the position of something you programmed yourself with a long time ago. And you've rerun that memory in a physical sense by reaching out and trying to get something out of the cupboard. Well, why have you done that? Because it's a time for you to delete that early childhood idea that you're not allowed to do what you want to do and that you have to be responsible for your body, because if you don't, you're going to pee on the floor. Very simple one. The next syndrome is the crying syndrome. Okay, we've used the example of babies drop the vase, mummy's vase on the floor, and mummy said she's angry and she's got the fierce eyes and she's this and that, frowning at you and whatever. She's suddenly become the monster. Now, as you grow and mature, you're watching those faces on other angry people. And as you watch that, you begin to feel, isn't there anyone in this world who's happy? I'm not happy because they're all unhappy. And all I want to do is sit down and be miserable and cry because nobody loves me. Nobody cares about me. Where does that come out in the body? Again, this is the brain. Okay, the brain is processing this idea that everybody is miserable and angry, and that you are suffering at the hands of all these miserable, angry people. And so you feel very alone, very isolated, and your hands want to touch something, hold something, but you might break it. So a lot is stored in your fingers, in your hands, about your suffering. Now, if you think about your religion, say you're a Christian and you're thinking about Jesus or Spartacus on the cross or whatever the Romans did, then you're likely to identify with the race here. If you're working away typing all day, you're using all these muscles, you're stimulating memories that are subliminal from when you were a child, where you were looking at the crying syndrome. So a lot of that is in the hands, and it's also in the feet, because when you're a child, you're told, stand to attention, stop crying, behave yourself, stop being a baby, grow up. But what does a baby know about growing up? What does a child know about growing up? We all long to be an adult because then we'll have freedom of spirit, freedom of choice, freedom to do whatever we want to do. But the thing is, we don't know what that is that we want to do because we have no idea. We haven't got to a mature state yet. So our baby self is programmed into the crying syndrome. So it's very important that we work on letting go of the baby in us that wants to cry all the time. So we have to move all the muscles throughout the body. And if we're looking at the crown chakra and the hands and the fingers and the toes, we have to realize that everything has to come from the brain down the spine and out through impulses along nerve endings and back to the brain. So actually every nerve in your body is likely to play up, and you're going to have what we call the pains of the world. Today it could be the upper arm, tomorrow it could be the lower back, and next week it could be my shin. What you're telling yourself is these are all the times that you've programmed the belief that you are miserable and unhappy because your fate, as it were, is in the hands of every other individual in this world who is in some way a mother or father figure to you in your mind. Even though consciously you don't think that, subliminally you do, because your parents, grandparents, and so on are your models upon which you believe the rest of the world is exactly the same. The next syndrome is the guilt syndrome. Now, the guilt syndrome is an emotional blackmail syndrome to self, as it were. If I don't do A, B, and C, I'll be the failure of the month. And if I don't perform according to my sex, male or female, and function in the right mode as a male or female, then I'm going to be in trouble. I got to itch here. That's a symbolic thing. Itching happens. Okay, when we think about how we are taught, you are a woman and therefore you must be a lady and you must present yourself as a woman of substance. You can't be a whore, for example. Which is absolutely a load of rubbish, because you could be a whore if you wanted to be, and you would serve someone, some man or some other woman in some way, and that would be very necessary for the partner that you would be with, because they need a sexual expression in some form or shape to express their personality. It's not about their character, it's about their personality. I like to perform, I like to play, I like to be in a production, I want to be in a drama. So actors love that, they love to be in that kind of profession because they can put on the face, the mask of any type of personality. So you could watch some very famous act, a very austere kind of Queen Elizabeth I movie, and then the next thing you come along and you see them in another movie where they're having great sex with some guy in a nude scene. It's so completely different. So the syndrome for sexual/guilt is coming under the artistic vein of my body. And when we think about how we can use our body, we can run, we can jump, we can hop, we can skip, we can do talents with it and whatever we need the whole body to function. But where is the strength? It's in the hips. It's in the part of body that can move and dance and control your balance and your harmony within who you are as a personality. And if you think about your hips and you're having, say, having eventually in life to have a hip replacement or a femur replacement, the bone of the thigh, then you're looking at how your lower back has gone out of alignment somewhere in your youth. Now, we don't realize when we're young, and the bones are still growing and forming. But as we get older, we start to realize that we're not as malleable as we used to be, and we can't bend and stretch as much. And given in time, we get a stiff back. And when that happens, we start to fuse bones. And what we're looking at is rigidity. Because when we say that of ourselves, I want to stand my ground, I want to fight, I want to win the day by actually saying I'm expressing myself sexually through my male or female self, and if anyone is saying I shouldn't be doing that, then we're either going to stand our ground and say you're going to see me this way or so what, or we start feeling guilty. And either way, that gets locked into the hips, which brings us to fight, okay? Because the next syndrome that we all want to work with is, I want to stand my ground. You know, I've learned to be responsible. I've learned that crying makes me upset. I've learned my sex and the way I present myself to the world is important in how I perform. And now with the fight syndrome, I want to be able to really be in command. I'm the leader of the band, as it were. I put the rhythm out as the band, you know, the guy has the baton that swings it around a 1, 2, 3, 4. If we're doing dancing, or, you know, music, vibration, or drumming, or anything with a rhythm, it's very important that the body has a rhythm or vibration. And if we don't allow ourselves to have a rhythm, then we become inflexible, we become rigid. And when we become rigid, our entire spine, all the way down, right up from the neck to all the way down to the bottom, becomes very weak. Either it becomes, you get osteoporosis, which case you're snapping your bones, unfortunately, or it can be the opposite, where you've got too much calcium, so every bone is very hard and you're not producing enough red platelets and so on. This is anatomically, realize that. And so where do we store all this? It's in our thighs again, it's in our spine, it's in our thighs, and mostly in the back of the body. You know, I'm pulling all my shoulders back. I want to be strong and powerful. So if you just sit and do that right now while I'm talking to you, you'll see that you can feel yourself using all the muscles all the way down your spine. And without even realizing it, even though you're sitting, you will have tensed your legs and even your upper arms. So we're ready to fight, okay? Now, what are we fighting for? We're fighting for the will to do what we want to do when we want to do it? Or are we fighting for a cause that might be a losing cause? I was watching something just last night, and I was knowing, because it's a Scottish story, that the people of that time were fighting for the Jacobeans to get Prince Charlie back on the throne of England, which never happened. So that was a lost cause. But was it? Because in the overview, it also brought the Scots to realise and appreciate their land and to respect the highlands of that country. So there's good and bad in everything, and there's no judgment here on fighting. There's no judgment at all. It's only an opinion of self and how you want to see yourself and how you want to stand your ground. But if you lose it and you get angry, then you're going to find that you're in a mode of destruction. And that destruction is not about killing 900 other people, it's about killing yourself as you try and hit out. You're actually destroying your body. Okay, so that brings us now to the flight syndrome, the last one. The flight syndrome is, you know, run away to live to fight another day. Sometimes we don't need to be, you know, the first one to run, charging into battle or fighting for a cause. Or sometimes we need, you know, a pioneer to do that, and they'll be running with the fight syndrome. But maybe they get destroyed in the action, but it's saying enough that it makes those who look on, observe, say, aha, I saw the good in that, but I also saw the foolishness or the weakness or, you know, the lack of understanding or the situation is not fully made clear, one should have had more caution and so on. So the flight is a self-protection syndrome that allows your brain to weigh down the situation and decide if you should walk away or run away. Well, obviously, someone said the bomb is going to blow up, you're going to run as fast as you can. Every muscle in your body is stimulated to escape. And you could just as easily be sitting in the chair with your boss at work and he's going on and on about something that you have to do in the job, and all you want to do is get out of there because you don't want to work the way that person wants you to work. And in understanding that, you suddenly find yourself aching all over. Every muscle feels as though you've been, as the expression says, dragged through a hedge backwards. No control over your body. It feels like you are about to crack and give up. The ghost, as it was, we used to say in England, you mean lose your spirit, lose your soul. And of course, that's going to be in your neck again because of communications. It's going to be in your perception, your third eye, because you're trying to understand what's being said. It's going to be in your heart chakra because you're asking about what you feel. So, what's happening with your solar plexus? Well, your solar plexus, I didn't mention it until now because I want you to understand that every one of these syndromes, the responsibility, crying, sexual, or guilt, it's used both for that, flight and fight, are all running at the same time in you. So your solar plexus starts to feel as though it's weak and like going for an examination, and you're so nervous that you're going to fail, and you feel that collywobbles in your belly, and you just feel incapable of doing anything or even defending yourself. That's the weak side of this, when these 5 syndromes are all running in the negative and you are scared stiff. And your brain is busy looking for an alternative. And where are you going to find your alternatives? By digging into your past experiences. And of course, your brain has an anomaly within itself that it can categorize all the different experiences you've had into groups that are controlled by a certain emotion. So you have groups of anger, you have groups of fear, you have groups of loss, you have groups of rage or anger, as I said earlier, and so on. And we have many cross members of emotions of I'm happy and I'm sad at the same time. You think, but actually you can't. You just flip. You can be happy and then you can be sad, but you can't be happy and sad at the same time because then your brain's confused. So you just sit there without knowing why you're crying and laughing at the same time. And believe me, you can have that experience, but you feel out of control because you don't know what's going on with you. Okay, so the flight syndrome is throughout the entire body, running down the spine, running into every muscle in your body. And of course, if it's repeated time and time again, then it's going to develop into rheumatoid arthritis, any number of illnesses that could manifest. Now, what people don't know is there is a spleen chakra that runs from the left rear waistline to the right front. I know you can't see my hands, but I can sure you can see this elbow's more to the back, this one's more to the front. And so what my hands are doing is they're resting on my hips, on the sides. And the bottom line here is as my hands are running through energy, that energy is running from the rear to the front and from the front to the rear. I'm healing my spleen chakra. Now it's called the spleen chakra because at the left rear is your spleen. But when you think about it, the spleen chakra runs all the way through to the front where your liver is. And if you think about all the major organs of your body, they all are together, tips, parts to full parts. We've got the tips of the lungs, we've got the adrenals, we've got the kidneys, we've got the ascending, transverse colon, a little bit of the ascending and descending colon. We've got the liver, the gallbladder. You can get an anatomy book and you can look. And this is like the engine of your body. Everybody seems to think that the brain is the engine of the body, but really no, it's the gearbox. Your brain is the gearbox. It decides if you're going to be in first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth, or fifth. What would those gears be? First is very earthly, materialism. Second gear would be emotional, mental states. Third gear would be your spiritual self, in essence, aware of your being as a spiritual being in your body. Fourth gear would be ascended, as I'm channeling your spirit guides, so you can channel your spirit guides. And the fifth, God, the highest part of self. So all of that is going on in the spleen chakra, allowing you to have a body that survives the traumas of these 5 body syndromes. And most people don't even know that they have these body syndromes because it's not being taught in schools. In fact, when I was studying psychology and psychiatry, nobody even used the word syndrome in those days. Okay, with the birth of NLP, which came out of pioneers of people like myself, who neuro-linguistic programming was a term that I didn't create. Somebody else much younger than me created it, but we, as young nurses in 1890, I was working nursing from 16 through 21, something like that. And I sort of interchanged just in those years alone, where 16 it was basically nursing was wash your body and make sure the drip was in the right position and so on, to by the time I was done being able to prep people for surgery. And now today nurses can give all sorts of medications and become a nurse practitioner, which is one step down from a doctor. For me, I went into psychology and psychiatry. I preferred that, and then into alternative medicine, and I was a pioneer in that. And so these things that I'm talking to you about, these body syndromes, are very important, because if you stop and think how each of these chakras is working, we now have to think about the base chakra, and the base chakra, root chakra, is your private parts. Here, the private parts are where you learned when you came into embodiment to poop and pee. And so every time you poop and pee throughout your life, or throw up when you've had too much milk, you are actually clearing the base chakra. You're saying, I've got too much negativity in my base chakra, I need to get it out of me. And when you feel very negative, it's not unusual for a person to say, I feel like throwing up. And that's because you're running the baby scenario of your first experiences being born into this world that was negative. Where did that negativity come from? I'm afraid, yes, it comes from your mother and your father's DNA. But you chose that. And in choosing that, it's your tool by which you will monitor yourself throughout your life. So if you are in the mode of stressing yourself out, running all these body syndromes, you are going to find yourself ultimately feeling that you need to go to the bathroom frequently, that you're not having control over your bladder, that there's something wrong with your bowels. Maybe you have irritable bowel syndrome or worse. Maybe you develop some of these real serious diseases where the brain is breaking down and the body is breaking down as well. So then we've got a complete unity of negativity going on between all the syndromes, going down through all the chakras, while your poor spleen chakra is desperately, desperately trying to balance these other chakras, and obviously not winning, so that you develop something like multiple sclerosis. And so, whatever is happening with your body, the thing to know here is that we have a hidden secret coding within the brain through the higher consciousness that gives us right back here in the back of our brain, in our memory area, an ability to rejuvenate. Now, if you think about yourself as a little kiddie having the measles and mumps and chicken pox and all these things, how do you think you knew to fight with antibodies and make yourself better? It's back there. Your body has a natural healing ability. But if you're not listening to it, if you're not getting into the positive side of the body syndromes and saying, aha, I learned by doing things the wrong way that that was not good, there's an alternative and I can do things in the right way for me, not for the world, for me, then I'm going to be able to rejuvenate. I'm going to have my lymphatic system fighting with more white cells and red cells coming in there, and there's so much more known about the blood. When I was nursing, there were sort of, I think, about 7 things that was in the blood. And today, of course, they can tell so much more just from your blood, the things that they test. It's at least 35 things they can test in your blood and find out what's wrong with you. And from that blood, they can find out if you have a bad bladder or a bad colon or bad heart and so on. So we're lucky that we've evolved so much in just 100 years. Yes, I was born in 1942, and so I'm 77, and I've seen tremendous change. So imagine what my father saw, being born in 1916 and passing over 2016, I think the century I'm in. So I want you to understand by this little talk that what I'm actually teaching you is to think about your own body syndromes, to actually acknowledge if you have any pains anywhere throughout your body, that you must delete fear, pain, anger, and guilt from your body. Okay, so that you can then rejuvenate and allow your lymphatic system and your blood system and your glandular systems to really rebuild the body. And when you do that, you go through a crisis. What that basically means is you get to a point of, I feel like I'm death warmed up. I just don't want to live anymore. I feel suicidal, or I feel so helpless. I just want to cry morning, noon, and night. I'm enraged. I want to hit the whole world and beat everybody up. And, I'm going to get a gun and go out and shoot the world and then shoot myself. Unfortunately, it's happening now. These are all as a result of the imbalance of the body syndromes. So what can you do to help yourself get rid of them? Well, of course, there's lots of different therapies. But the main thing to understand is your brain is your record of everything that you've ever done. You've stored everything in the form of pictures. And pictures are encoded down to pixels, little impulses of light and dark. Yes, your brain is a computer, zeros and ones. And you are able, in your own way, to associate through your 5 senses. That means smell, taste, they go together. We call that clairsentience. And then we have clairvoyance, which is seeing, clairaudience, which is listening, and listening can be externally and internally. It can be someone else's voice you can hear, or it could be your own voice that you hear yourself talking to yourself about. And believe you me, we all talk to ourselves morning, noon, and night. So you're reprogramming yourself or repeating the same program over and over again. If you're repeating the same program over and over again, you're in a loop and you're going to get sick. You might be having one of the body syndromes leading the way by saying, oh yes, I'm definitely running the responsibility syndrome, but I'm here to say that is covering up the other 4. So you need to work on all 5 body syndromes and delete fear, pain, anger, and guilt from those 5 bodies. That are the syndromes that you have learned to believe are you in personality. But there's a deeper you. There's a spiritual you. And that spiritual you also has a coding. And that spiritual you has had certain parts of that coding since you were created. So what I'd like to talk about here on top of the body syndromes is your archetype. Now, if we think about an archetype, we think about it means the pinnacle of one type. And for your understanding, and as Christian people, though I will say that the archangels have many names around the world, and there are only 7 of them, and they're the primary creators of all form. And we begin with Raphael, and we go through to Zephyr. So we've got Raphael, we've got Gabriel, we've got Michael, then we've got Haniel, then we've got Faniel, and then we've got Barakiel, and then we've got Zephyr. What each did in their own way was separate and separate and create and create and separate and create and create. And since the coding of the oneness is under those 7 umbrellas of their archetypes, which are king, warrior, I've got them written down here because I always remember they're in pairs, so I'll start with the top. The sage and the artisan, they go together. Okay, the priest and the slave, they go together. The king and the warrior, they go together. And the scholar is the observer who collects all the information. Zephyr is a scholar. So with each, and I won't go too much into the archangels right now, but with each archangel, they were encoded to separate a part of themselves in order to create something more. And each in their own way decided by their own need to create something out of the energy of self, which is no different from me saying to you, okay, here's some yarn, here's some needles, go make something. And you look at it and think, well, I could try knitting, but I don't know if I've ever really made it, done it, I'll probably make a big hole. And you have a go, and over a period of time with practice, you find you can knit a square. And you think, wow, look what I made. Well, in a way, that's the primary energy of each archangel, having a go, seeing what they could make. And given time, a lot of things they made were not very good, so it was inevitable that I don't want it anymore. I don't value it. I don't appreciate it. I think I'll just throw it away. Well, you can't throw self away. You can't throw, the experience away, but you can throw the item away because it's a reminder of what you don't want to do. But then on the other side, you might want to keep it because it reminds you don't do it again. So it becomes complex. The archangels created a complex web of design, shall we say, that allows us to live on this planet with what we call a soul structure coding. And while I'm not going to go into all the detail of that in this hour talk here, I will give you the parts of it. So we have the archetype, and in my case, I am a warrior. And a warrior's energy is a pioneer to cut a pathway. And I've certainly done that throughout my life. I have done that through many of my other lives, and will continue to always be a pioneer as a warrior. That's my primary coding when I was made. But I can borrow the masks of the others. So in this life, I can be the artisan, and I can be very creative and inventive, and what you can see behind me, I've painted and decorated and done things. That's the way I am. It's a natural instinct because I encoded that in this life. I wanted to use the artisan. So yes, I can play, I can sing, I can dance, or whatever I put my mind to. It's the creator. The artisan is the copycat of the creator. I also have the priest. Now, the priest is like the counselor, the teacher, the philosopher. So I'm a minister, an ordained minister, and I teach, and you can see what I'm doing here. So I think you can see I'm wearing the mask of that too. So my warrior is often controlled by the priest and the artisan, meaning I have to think my pathway and use those talents in order to go along my pathway to entice people to want to study with me and learn from me what I'm doing in my life as a living example that others could copy me and move on in this world. I'm also using the scholar, and so what that means is I have the ability to teach unknown things because I've observed, I've watched people and seen things that other people don't see. And that's because I'm very psychic and I'm very attuned to the oneness and God. So I've got all these marks on top of my original warrior. And the warrior needs to have a connection with the scholar to know the rights and wrongs of life in order to be able to help people in this world. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people that call me up and say, I want my soul structure coding and so on. And I do those readings and I do channel that from your spirit guides for you. But I'm not here pitching this right now. I'm here to teach you just what the soul structure coding is. Now, the next thing that we do when we come into embodiment is we choose a goal. And I'm only going to mention that I'm not going into all the details of this. A goal's purpose is we start life, and by the time we end our life, death scenario, we have achieved our goal. Mine is to find the joy of life. And I'll say that simple that way. The next thing we do is we choose before embodiment through hereditary DNA and genes to develop certain personality traits. And those personality traits are one for our mind, one for our emotions, and one for the way we conduct ourselves, the way we act. And that is encoded into every cell in our body as well. Then we have what we call the attitudes. And the attitudes give us years of cycles of time. I was born to a realist. My mother's, we're in war, and the realist is I could be killed any minute. But my coding in my spiritual essence is the idealist. So while everyone's saying this is this and this is the fact, I'm going, no, that's not the fact. I can see deeper, I can see wider and more. And so that's what made me become a philosopher and do the things that I'm doing. And at one period in my time, I also became spiritualist because I'm spiritualist medium and so on. And so I've got 3 cycles that I've lived through. And I'm 77 and I'm just starting a new one where I'm actually going into my higher consciousness. Now, higher consciousness is installed in this, what we call the centers. And the centers are higher intellectual, normal intellectual, higher emotional, normal emotional, sexual, or crown chakra that I talked about earlier on. So if we're crown chakra, we're motivated. We move like a speedboat and we don't worry about the wake behind. If we're in the sexual center, then we're looking at every itty bitty bit of disturbance that we're making, worrying about whether we're right or wrong, whether we're liked or not liked, and so on. And all the while, the energy is moving up and down our spine, and we are learning to spiritually trust ourselves. And last but not least, to the soul structure coding is what we call the chief feature. None of them are nice, like greed. If we didn't have greed, we wouldn't reach out to get more, and we wouldn't have more experiences. So they sound bad, but they're actually very necessary. They're our safety net that allows us to, prepare for more lessons to come. So I'll just give you one more chief feature, self-deprecation. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. Even though I can play the concerto in G.F. minor, Schubert, something or other, I'm still not fast enough, and my fingers don't twiddle enough, and I don't have this passion, and, okay. Are you going to judge yourself to the point where you just don't ever play the piano again? No, of course not. You've put your hard work in. You practice, but there's got to come a time when you're going to say, enough practicing, let's just enjoy the playing. And that's when the emotion comes in. So each of the chief features is about finding your emotion, your true self, your spiritual self. All of this is integrated into your DNA, along with the body syndromes, the working of your chakras, the meridians of your 5 bodies. You are a complete being, and most of us don't even know that. Well, I want to thank you for listening to this 1 hour. It's my first talk that I've given. I hope you've enjoyed it. I am open to questions. You can write to me. I'm changing my email for this course. It's Professor PROF Margaret MARGARET RVC for Rogers Van Coops @gmail.com. Okay, you can go to sumaricenter.com and put in your name and your email address and your interest, and then I'll know that you want to study with me, and then I will contact you, and we will make an arrangement whereby you will be notified of each topic that I'm going to put up, and there will be a fee. It's not a lot. It'll be $35 for the hour, and hopefully you'll like that. And then when you come back with Q&A, that part will be free for the follow-up session. So until we meet again, be happy. Goodbye.